The 19th century really left its mark on London. This century was the century of one woman, Queen Victoria. If London is still one of the most beautiful cities in the world, it is thanks to her. Like this train station, St Pancras, one of the gateways to the city. Its pure Victorian style has been perfectly preserved. In 2007, a modern extension was added to the historic hall, the terminus of the high-speed rail line welcoming Eurostar trains. This gigantic hall was, at the time, the largest single-span structure ever created. Victoria was very proud of it. Yet could she have imagined that she would have had such an influence on the capital and the era when she took her first steps as a queen here in Westminster? The Abbey, where marriages, funerals and coronations are held, is emblematic of the English royal family. On the 21st of July, 1838, the young Victoria, barely 18 years old, was crowned Queen of the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Ireland here. The Abbey is sparkling for the occasion. Rows of seats are brought in especially for the thousands of guests. The historian, Lucy Worsley, opens the doors to the chapel for us. The ceremony's most symbolic piece of furniture is preserved here, the coronation chair.
The coronation chair is 700 years old. It was made for Edward I. And its significance is that it's been used in every coronation since then. It is the most ancient, the most significant piece of furniture. And at the moment when Queen Victoria would have been sitting in here, she would have realized that she actually was now the Queen.
However, nothing predestined the young girl to become Queen. Since King William IV did not have any legitimate children to succeed him, it would be his niece, Victoria, who would inherit the crown. To explore the strong bonds uniting Victoria and London, we must head towards the centre of the city, to Kensington Palace. Kensington Palace has been one of the British royal family's residences for more than 3 centuries. In 1819, Prince Edward Augustus and his wife, the Duchess of Kent, moved in here. Their daughter, Victoria, was born in the same year. Despite the exceptional destiny that awaited Victoria, she would live a melancholy youth in this room, under the strict control of her mother. The Duchess of Kent was convinced that Victoria would accede to the throne one day. On the 20th of June, 1837, William IV passed away, and Victoria's life was turned upside down. The new sovereign left Kensington Palace and didn't return for over 30 years. She chose Buckingham Palace as her new royal abode. Victoria was the first sovereign to officially reside in the enormous palace. Victoria was queen, but she was unmarried. Social conventions demanded that she find a husband. She considered her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg. It was love at first sight. The nuptials took place on the 10th of February, 1840. All eyes were upon them. Victoria and Prince Albert were to reign over a kingdom undergoing tremendous changes. The 19th century was marked by the height of the Industrial Revolution, just as new inventions profoundly changed society. The royal couple would also transform England and its capital. London has been able to preserve elements from that era in its way of life. Every evening after leaving the office, Londoners can be seen meeting in pubs. We're in the district of Paddington. The Victoria is what is known as a traditional Victorian pub.
There it is, nice Sauvignon. Thanks very much. Oh, Sauvignon Blanc? Yeah, cheers.
The pub bears the Queen's name because of a legend that is told over the bar. Chris is the pub's owner.
French-style head on it, of course. There was a rumour, and it's only a rumour, that Queen Victoria came in here for a pint on the way up to Paddington Station. So, you know, I don't know whether it's true or not, but that is the story that I tell everyone anyway. So that's it.
True or false, the legend has shaped this place. For 150 years, the pub's interior decoration has been entirely devoted to the Queen. In the 19th century, brewers wanted to open high-quality establishments to attract the new social class. They therefore called on the most renowned craftsmen to decorate them with the most expensive materials. Everything was designed so that people felt comfortable and would stay here longer.
In the 19th century, they would have been packed because your house was so cold, wet, miserable, boring place to be, whereas the pub was the big, warm place on the corner where you could have a little bit of something to drink, chat to some people, and say maybe have a bit of a kiss and a cuddle, and that's it, really. That's why wouldn't you want to go to a pub? Because your home was so horrible. It's still the same today.
Though today everyone mixes in the pub, at the time it was inconceivable to drink your beer with someone of another class. So as not to lose part of their clientele, the owners had an idea.
So here we've got two different doors that you get into the pub. This one still exists, this one's blocked off. The reason why is that you have lots of screens. This would have been screened off. So this was like a little snug, little private snug for people. This might have been another one here and a further one here with lots of panels. Even some pubs had panels so they wouldn't have to see the barman. So they just turn the panel round and say, can I have a pint of lager, please? But yeah, different sections because people wanted a little bit, sometimes they wanted privacy, and also it was a bit of a class thing as well.
The pub retains an authentic private area upstairs with this traditional English lounge. Charles Dickens could have found inspiration for one of his books here. The pub owner's gamble had paid off. Clients stayed in their establishments for long periods of time, to the point where they would even linger a little too much. They therefore had to look for another solution.
That means last orders. So that's normally rung on a normal night at 10 to 11. And that means you've got 10 minutes to get the drinks in. And then at 11 o'clock, no more drinks. 11 o'clock closing time in England came from the First World War because the pubs used to be open longer, but people used to get too drunk, drinking every night after work, and they couldn't get into the factories to make all the bullets and the munitions. So the government introduced this act.
In the Victoria, they continue to ring the bell. so as not to forget the tradition.
I really wanna jump with you. I wanna.
At an architectural level, Victoria's reign is marked by the reconstruction of the Palace of Westminster, destroyed by a fire in 1834. Today, it is the seat of Parliament. Big Ben has become a symbol of the city. The architectural ensemble illustrates the principal trend of the era, the neo-Gothic. It is a style characteristic of many of London's churches. This is the All Saints' Church, a true masterpiece, constructed in 1850. Chris Meal is waiting for us here. He is an architectural historian, interested in the new materials used to construct this church, the decoration of which is inspired by the medieval period. Its execution in the Victorian era means that it benefited from the latest industrial advancements.
This little tile tells a big story. It's based on a medieval pattern. But during Queen Victoria's reign, this method of making tiles is industrialized and expanded to greater proportions than could ever have been imagined in the medieval period. Tiles were common in churches, in offices, in houses, and this medieval technique was exported across all English-speaking dominions and around the empire. Plate glass was introduced, enabling larger windows and more light. Gas lighting was introduced, enabling brighter colored interiors that could be illuminated in this new way. Iron and then eventually steel was introduced, enabling large span spaces that had never been seen or created before. Architects were keen to exploit these new materials for their own purposes. Sometimes they exposed them frankly, other times they hid them within traditional historical forms.
But even if architects were competing audaciously where major projects desired by the Queen were concerned, a large part of London remained insalubrious. Despite this, the population exploded in the late 19th century, rapidly increasing from 1 to 6 million inhabitants. London became the largest city in the world, and its new arrivals often crammed into the most notorious areas. It is here that a murderer became the talk of the town in Victorian England. In these narrow streets in Whitechapel, a gloomy district of East London, 5 prostitutes would be murdered in the dead of night, with unprecedented cruelty. The historian Eric Simon takes us on the trail of this unsolved case.
It's around about here that on the night of the 30th of August 1888, they were to find the body of Jack the Ripper's first victim. She was called Polly Nichols, Red Polly, not because she was a communist, simply because she was a redhead. It's a policeman who finds her at around 2 in the morning. He thinks it's a drunkard sleeping. That usually happened in the back alleys of Whitechapel. But in fact, when he tries to wake her, he gives her a little push and he sees a puddle of blood flowing out. Yet
this first murder goes almost unnoticed. Crime is common in the East End. The area was plunged into abject poverty. The people living here were those left behind by the glorious Industrial Revolution.
It was total chaos. Up to 8 people were living in each room. They didn't even have a bed. People slept on the corner of a table. In the night shelters, if people couldn't afford to pay 4 pennies for a bed, they could have the rope. Do you know what sleeping over the rope is? Well, sleeping over the rope, you lean over a rope and in the morning at 5 a.m, the owner of that destitute shelter pulls the rope, you fall on the floor and you wake up. And there you go. People were at the mercy of disease, of poverty, and this is the fascinating thing, that Jack would act in this East End, the mysterious East End, the East End where nobody even dared to come for a walk on a Saturday or a Sunday. There you go.
As the weeks went on, new victims would be discovered. The horror of the crimes becomes more and more unbearable. We now know that we're dealing with a serial killer, first given the nickname, the Butcher of Whitechapel. Public opinion takes hold of this story.
Queen Victoria, what did she think about all this? Well, firstly, she was interested in Jack, because he was attacking the paupers of the East End. She would tell the Home Secretary, "You absolutely must stop him. I command you. It's an order. You must stop this thug for me."
Substantial resources are deployed, but no trail leads the police to this mysterious murderer. Having no boundaries, the killer goes as far as to provoke the authorities by speaking directly to the press. Eric takes us to the city's archives. An exceptional document that would bring a new twist to the case is preserved here. It is a letter written in red ink. It's from a man who claims to be Jack the Ripper.
It's a very nice letter. Really beautifully written and full of humour. He basically says, "Rest assured, I do not know a policeman smart enough to be able to stop me. In any case, I send you my best wishes, your friend, Jack the Ripper." It is he who comes up with the name Jack the Ripper. It wasn't the journalists at all. It wasn't the press that invented the name. He himself signs off Jack the Ripper. I feel like he is in front of me, Jack. I believe that this letter was really written by that mentally ill criminal genius known as Jack the Ripper.
It was decided to publish this letter in the hope that someone would recognize the suspect's writing. It was to no avail. Consequently, the press would pick up the case, and it made a sensational impact.
The Victorian press would change significantly as a result of the case of Jack the Ripper. The print runs would be extraordinary. People didn't read, but they knew how to look at a page in a newspaper. The page spoke to them. From here on in, what is known as the gutter press in England would develop at an extraordinary speed. The rotary press turned and absolutely everything sold. As soon as they mentioned Jack the Ripper, they were sure to get good sales.
Fear is at its height when the body of Mary Jane Kelly is discovered in this building. She would be the 5th and final victim to be brutally slaughtered. The murders would suddenly stop. The world will never know the identity of Jack the Ripper for sure. Yet one thing is certain, the murders drew attention to this area.
Queen Victoria would demand vast changes in the East End. The dirt would be forgotten, cobblestones would be put down, the streets would be lit. The streets of the East End were not illuminated. Charities would descend on the East End. Queen Victoria said, "That's it. We must absolutely go to the East End and help the people. It is our duty as English citizens and as Christians." And something that is also very interesting is that you have a priest from the church in Whitechapel called Reverend Barnett who would make a quite extraordinary sermon where he would basically say, Jack, we thank you. Thanks to you, poverty will gradually disappear from the East End of London. Now we know we exist. And there you have it. Voilà.
Despite its blistering expansion, London is also a green city. Almost a third of the British capital is covered by parks. Parks that are still the charm of the city. English sovereigns would progressively open up their former hunting reserves to the public. They gave their subjects somewhere to relax. A truly unique place can be found right in the heart of Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner. In the Victorian era, Hyde Park was a favoured place for demonstrations. To prevent things getting out of hand, they gave the protesters the right to express themselves within this space. Since 1872, every Sunday, speakers come here to express their thoughts freely.
I have other reasons to be a Catholic. From the outside, somebody might go, oh, there's a dispute, there's a controversy, let's not believe in it.
Democracy is so much more successful than any other system in the world.
Can God have a son? Can God have a son? Jesus is special. He's special.
On the other bank of the Thames is Kew Gardens. This is the park which would be the great pride of Queen Victoria. She brought the rarest and most beautiful plant specimens from the four corners of the world here.
The fish need to be fed. Have you fed them yet? No, so they're not being fed. So
David Cook is one of Kew's head gardeners. He is in charge of this incredible botanical collection that caused a sensation in the Victorian era.
the Kew collectors going out, Kingdom Ward, you know, the hookers going out to these amazing far-flung places, Southeast Asia, China, South America, collecting these fantastic plants, orchids, begonias, you know, insectivorous plants, nepenthes, coming to Kew for the first time. It was a bit of a revolution for the Victorians because, you know, these people had quite a dull life, you know, there wasn't very much, and seeing, you know, bright colours and green, it was fantastic for them to see.
Victoria also supported botanical research. Many interesting discoveries were made, such as this huge water lily found in the Amazon.
This is the water lily house. This is specifically designed to grow one of these fantastic plants from Victoria's time, Victoria cruziana, originally named after Queen Victoria, a very, very small seed from South America. And it has these fantastic, nearly up to 2 metre wide leaves. I don't think I can sit on there, but a young baby could be placed on there without it sinking. So, you know, the Victorian designers, you know, the wrought iron, the metalwork designers, looked at the shape of the leaf and came up with, you know, the structures for the glass houses and it was developed from the bottom of the leaf there.
Queen Victoria passed away in 1901 after having reigned for almost 64 years. She would leave her mark on London as a monarch rarely has done on their capital, making the city a metropolis proud of its history, but resolutely looking towards the future.